So I got a new kitten. This is my new baby. Her name is Angel. She's a calico. Yes, say hi. Say hi. You know, I forget how good I look in red. I'm like really living for this hair. So, as you can see by the title of this video, I am once again putting off my review for Season 2, Episode 5 of Hell of a Boss. I'm sorry, I couldn't even say that with a straight face. Oh my god. Okay, let me try that again. Ooh. So, as you can see from the title of this video, I am once again putting off my review for Season 2, Episode 5 of Hell of a Boss. Honestly, I can save us all the time and just say I didn't care for it. I don't really know that that requires a full video to say. You know, it's kind of like when I was reviewing Good Omens. There were just some episodes that I just didn't care for, and this was one of them.
I heard you complimenting yourself.
No, that's true. I look good in everything.
Look good in everything.
Oh, okay. As you can tell, this also isn't my Millwordy video that I said I was going to make last week. Honestly, I don't know that there's really enough there to make a whole video. I was basically just going to say how it kind of happened completely by accident. I wasn't intending to write a million words between August of last year and August of this year. It just sort of happened. I know that sounds like does not make sense, but it was just like 1 minute I'm writing a bunch of fanfic and the next minute I'm like, oh shit, I'm at like 500,000 words that I've written. And then the next thing I know, I'm like, I'm at 700,000 words. And I was like, okay. Once I got to 700,000, I was like, I'm actually very curious if I can make it to 1 million. And so it's like, it wasn't intentional until it was. And I managed to make the 1 million. Thank you. Applause for me. I'm very happy about it, but it's also like I'm fully exhausted. And as you saw from the previous clip, I now have a new kitten. So all I can deal with is, you know, making sure she's happy. She is upstairs in the bedroom, so God knows what she's up to. Suffice it to say, yeah, it's just, it was like, I don't know. I don't have anything to say about the 1 million words. I wrote a blog post about it, so if you really want to see like more, you can read that. So in that case, let's get to the meat of the video, or in my case, the tofu. Is that too dumb? Hello, sinners, and hail Sappho. It's your hostess with the mostest, Narcissa Deville, and this week we are going to be talking about, why am I talking like that? We're going to be talking about it's a serious subject, so I do want to have like a little disclaimer. Obviously the title kind of implies what this is going to be about, but I do want to get into that this is going to be about the subject of queerphobia. So it is going to cover things like biphobia, transphobia, acephobia, and I probably will be getting into some general fandom discourse as well, but I just kind of want to just make that clear so nobody feels like they are not prepared going in for what this video is going to be about. But it is something that I want to talk about because I got a specific comment on my video. And it wasn't last week's video. I think it was one of the videos before that. So this person, I mean, they left a really long comment. It was a really good comment. I was wondering, I don't really know how to articulate this without seeming a bit blunt, but would you have any thoughts on like the disproportionate amount of straight white men of, let's say, certain leanings taking up certain disproportionate amount of space in the fandom, at least on YouTube and Reddit, as opposed to women, LGBTQ people, and femmes and drag artists in general? Because to be honest, you're the first woman I've seen on here who fits all of those categories, talking about VivziePop, who's like a genuine fan of hers, and finding your channel felt like a needle in a haystack moment for me. I'm happy I did, but I feel like it shouldn't be that way, because it's just like, where are all the other femme LGBTQ plus channels talking about these femme-run, feminine LGBTQ plus cartoon shows when they should be? And honestly, I feel like that would make a really good topic for a future Get Ready With Me. So here we go. Now, I have to be honest, when I got this question, I was very interested because I have actually heard from other people, not like directly, I've like seen comments from other people about this kind of issue, right? Like I remember seeing a thread? What would you call it? A thread a thread post about this, actually almost exactly the same subject, where it was someone talking about how there is I think it's a has-been Facebook group that apparently has been known to kick people out when they find out that they're queer, or, you know, they have a tendency to shut down any conversation about the fact that the characters are queer, and, you know, kind of trying to pretend like it's not a major focus of the show, which I find fascinating. I do not exist on Facebook to that degree. I have my own, like, Facebook fan page, but I don't actively look on Facebook. You know, I'm sent things periodically from one of my friends, but I'm not, like, on Facebook to that degree. The commenter that I got did mention specifically YouTube and Reddit, so I decided to look up because I was curious. And I guess to a certain extent, I don't know how much YouTube bases what they, like, when you look something up, how much they base it on, like, you and your own personal, like, brand or whatever. Because when I looked up Has-Been or Hell of a Boss and, you know, reaction videos and stuff like that, I found a pretty, I would say, 50-50 mix, right? I would say that the people talking about it, there was a couple of couples, which was cool. But I would say, like, it seemed like a pretty even split for me of, you know, women versus men talking about the show. I only really did a cursory glance. It might be that there's more women who are critical of the show. And again, I will say, I don't think the show is perfect. I personally, when I was looking it up, I can't, you know, just based on a cursory glance, I didn't watch any of the videos. I can't really say, you know, the content of them. I can't really speak to what other people are like. You know, yeah, I am someone who, you know, I'm a trans woman. I'm a femme lesbian. I consider how I do, you know, what I do on here to be draggy. So I am a very specific case, but I would say I can't really speak to whether or not I think that the majority of people in the fandom or people on YouTube or Reddit, because again, Reddit's also not a space that I'm on a lot or ever. So I don't really have a lot of examples of Reddit either. I tried to look up like a has-been specific group on Reddit, and it seemed like it was pretty chill. There was a bit of fan art, there was a bit of like talk about different things. So I don't really know. Again, it's hard when I don't exist in those spaces. I primarily exist on Tumblr. You know, it's me and Strange Eons. We're the only two there. So, you know, my experience with all of this kind of is almost exclusive to like Tumblr. So that has a very particular fandom. And it's not that toxicity doesn't exist on Tumblr, because we all know that it does. But it's not to the same degree, right? So then you have something like, I do kind of exist on Twitter. I'm a little more present there. But since I almost solely exist in like the radiodust forums of, you know, any social media account, you know, Instagram, Twitter, Tumblr, I really, you know, I follow very specific people who are into that sort of thing and block liberally because I believe in curating my experience as much as possible. So what I did was I put out a request for information from people that I know in the fandom, because I kind of wanted to, you know, figure out what other people's experiences were, right? Because I have not seen this. I'm also relatively new to the fandom. I would say that I think I watched the pilot when it came out, or I think I saw it in 2020. Like I said, after Saber Spark did his video on it, I ended up watching it. And then I kind of didn't even think about like fan fiction or anything like that. I don't know why. And it didn't occur to me that there would be like a whole fandom on Tumblr or anywhere else. Like, again, none of these things occurred to me for some reason, even though I've been a part of fandoms since 2010. I was a part of the Glee fandom, for fuck's sake. Like, you know, I'm not exactly new to fandom experiences, but for one reason or another, it just didn't occur to me somehow. I don't know. I don't pretend to know why I'm like this or why I don't, like, think about shit like that. So I had no idea that there was, like, pairings and, you know, shit like that until probably a month and a half, 2 months before the show came out, I think. And I think I stumbled upon an Angel and Alistair thing on Tumblr, and I was like, oh, that's kind of cute. It was like, I liked it ironically, and then I was like, oh no, this is like, I'm obsessed. So, the liking something ironically to this is now my personality pipeline is like too real. Also, I think this hair, I'm like low-key giving Alistair vibes. I do like being blonde, but I don't know, this is just fun. Anyway, so, I don't really have much experience myself with this. So, I wanted to kind of just ask people on my Tumblr what their experience was with this, because I can really only speak to my own personal experiences. And since I don't really have any, I do feel like to an extent I'm kind of in a queer space where I'm only really wanting to, again, it's curating your experience. I only really want to hear from other queer people. I only want to hear from people who enjoy the ships that I enjoy. I don't want to have to get into a fight. I don't want to have to, I know people are always like, oh, you have to be able to listen to both sides or whatever. And it's like, yeah, but I also don't want everything to be a fucking argument. I just want to be on the internet. When I want to be petty, fine. But for the most part, I just want to be on the internet and not deal with the drama. It's not that difficult to just do your thing and hang around the people that you want to hang around. So for me, I'm just I'm not going to engage in that kind of shit. I will say one thing I've thought about, because I do know there's a lot of women who, and this is kind of a side thing, but I do feel like there's been a lot of women who critique the show and critique oh, Viv doesn't know how to write women, which I find to be a very fascinating critique, because I'm just okay. I don't really know what that's based on. And I'm also just she is a woman though, but go off. I don't know. I just, I remember a time when the debate was oh, not every character has to be the strong female archetype. And now it's she doesn't know how to write women because I don't know what that's based on. You've got a character in Millie who is kick-ass but also has heart. There's more to her than that. And then you've got a character like Luna who is doesn't want to deal with her feelings, but neither does Blitz, neither does any other character in the show. I don't know. And then there's Charlie and back. I don't know. I don't get that whole statement of she doesn't know how to write women. It does not make sense to me, but whatever. Everyone has their own. And look, I'm not here to critique anyone's writing. I'll be 100% honest with you. Even if I don't care for it, I'm a creator. I know how that is. You did not ask my opinion. And quite frankly, listen, there's plenty of shit that is not that great that exists in this world that makes no fucking sense. So if Disney can write somehow Palpatine was back, I think you all can handle whatever the fuck Viv is doing on any given day. I don't agree with some of the decisions she's, necessarily makes on the show. And there's going to be things, fandom shit that I'm sure I'm not going to like. And hey, maybe I won't continue watching the show if that all goes down. But, so one person commented to me, admittedly, most of my queerphobia experiences involving the Hellaverse fandom has more to do with haters of the show than actual fans. But I had a run-in a while back on Reddit when this guy, and a lot more judging by the downvotes, got super angry with me for claiming there was nothing disproving a trans Luna headcanon. Instead of any actual evidence, he just kind of kept calling me an idiot instead. I wasn't even saying it was definitely true, just that it was plausible, and it was enough to make this guy completely melt down. What is it about Luna that seems to just bring out the most unhinged behavior in guys? Sound off below. I'm sure I can figure it out, but I just think it's a funny question. Yeah, headcanons are one of those things that I find so interesting for how just people can really show their ass. Because to me, I'm all for transing characters. If you enjoy this character, if that's going to make you enjoy her less, maybe you need to look inward about why that is. Because it's a head... And that's the other thing, too, is the thing that always gets me is it's literally a headcanon. It does not mean that it's an actual factual statement. It just means, oh, this is something I like to think about and would be interesting. Like, it's literally your opinion. I just think that's so funny to be like, oh no, you're an idiot. Your headcanon is wrong. It's like, I don't think that's how that works. No one's saying it's canon. That's not how headcanons work. It's just your own personal thing. Like, what? You know, here's the thing, right? And I think a lot of these conversations are actually larger fandom conversations in general. A lot of the topics, a lot of the conversations are like policing other people's thoughts, when in reality, all you have to do is mind your own goddamn business. Like, the thing that gets me, right, is like there's so much vitriol against people like myself who ship Alistair and Angel. And for me, my thing is like, if there's a ship I don't want to see, and there are a few, you can just block. You can just mute. Like, the way a lot of people in a certain section of the fandom who have a certain ship that they've decided is canon because of whatever bullshit, you know, for what I'm noticing is that they will go into the radiodust tags to talk about their shit. And I know that because Tumblr tells me when words are being blocked that I don't want to see. So, like, you know, if you're going out of your way to go into someone else's tag to bitch and complain, like, that's just sad. Grow up. Get a life. Get a hobby that isn't this. Like, that's not how, this is not how fandom should be. I know it's always been to some degree, but it's like, girl, I don't know. Like, it's just so annoying. Like, I just don't have time for it. I really don't have time for it. I cannot fathom how this is a thing that people feel the need to waste their time on. Of like, I am going to specifically go into someone else's tag to talk about how much I hate it. Like, that's pathetic. It's sad, but not in like it's just annoying. Like, don't do that shit. Like, who has time for that? That's what I'd like to know. Who the fuck has time for that kind of nonsense? If you don't like something, just block the fucking tag. It's not that difficult. The internet actually makes it easier than ever to not see shit you don't want to see. AO3 has tags for it. Do you know how many times I have to block a certain ship from popping up in fics that are supposed to be just Angel and Alistair? Because that is specifically what I'm looking for. Do you know how many times I have to block that shit? A lot. Because it happens a lot that there's, for some reason, they're tagging both. And it gets really annoying. But, you know, that's just what it is. You know, you have to curate your own experience. You have to say, I don't want to see this, so I am going to exclude it on AO3, so I don't have to ever see it. It's just that simple. I mean, it seems just that simple, but apparently people want to make it complicated. Now, another mutual of mine on Tumblr had a much longer answer, and it was really, really well done, and I really want to break that down point by point, so I'm going to be reading it directly from my phone, so sorry. A lot of what I've seen is other queer people with shitty attitudes who think they're doing the community a great service when they're actually being queerphobic. But there's some classic queerphobia in there too. Content warning discussions of queerphobia, obviously, and fandom discourse. Number 1, talking over other queer people to claim bad representation. The greatest example of this is Angel Dust, with people saying that the portrayal of him is homophobic and or transphobic. I've seen accusations of both transmisogyny and trender stereotyping from cis queer people, with no input from trans people that they're oh so concerned about. The existence of feminine, gay, drag queen, addict, sex workers is apparently offensive to some queer people, never mind the fact that there are scores of other queer people screaming from the rooftops about how we relate to him, or the fact that there are IRL, femme, gay men, drag queens, addicts, and sex workers in the queer community. And to this I say 100% I agree. And here's the thing, right? I've talked about this a lot. For me, before I was a trans woman, I was a very femme, gay guy. That is how I identified. So a character like Angel Dust is a character that I relate to so deeply. No, I've never been a sex worker. No, I've never been an addict. But that doesn't mean that I can't relate to a character of a very femme gay man living his best queer life. Afterlife, whatever. Maybe not best, it'll get better. But you know what I mean? Like, for me, I just feel like, you know, and I feel like this conversation has been had 1,000 times over every time there is a feminine queer man on TV, because there are a certain group of people who have decided that that is no longer acceptable, and you have to, just like the idea that people get so upset and angry when a butch exists in a show, which is so rare because we've decided that butches and studs no longer exist in media, which, read my book, because I can guarantee you there are a ton of butches in that book. But, you know, it's like this idea that, oh, if you fit into a stereotype of what it means to be queer, or what people think of, you know, when people think of a lesbian, they think of butches. If you think of a gay man, you think of, you know, a feminine gay man. And therefore, if you fall into that, you are somehow, you know, setting the community back. Like, actually, fuck that. Why do you give a shit how anyone chooses to express themselves? You know what I mean? Like, why are you gonna sit there and be like, oh no, you can't be femme and a gay man because that makes the whole community look bad. You have to butch it up. Or if you're a butch, you have to femme it up. Like, no. What we're not gonna do is sit here and police how queer people, especially other queer people, do gender identity. Like, no, we're not doing that. We need to stop this thing of like interpolicing people and how they express their gender. Like, it's so wild because it's like half the time the community is like, everyone should, you know, clothes have no gender. Everyone should be able to express themselves how they want. And then the next minute it's like, but not like that. Not like that. Not like that. And it's like, what the fuck do you want? Do you want people to express their gender, or do you want them to do it in the way that you approve of? Just mind your fucking business. That's all I have to say. Oh, and another thing, because I want to talk about this too, because they specifically use this term, I want to talk about the whole like trans trender thing, which is, if you have never heard of it, it must be so nice to be you. It's this concept of like, oh, being trans is trendy right now. So there's people who are gonna, you know, who think they're trans or are gonna pretend to be trans because it'll get them clout or something. Where do I even have to begin with that? Like, first of all, I have to tell you, if you are someone who believes that being trans has ever been cool enough that you can get some kind of collateral or clout because you're trans, I don't know what it's like to live in your world, but it must be nice. I would love for that to be the case. But again, it goes back to my earlier point of people gotta mind their own fucking business. I truly, like, I do not believe personally that there is a person out there whose transness exists solely because it's popular. I don't believe that. That is a talking point that TERFs have used. That is a talking point that Republicans have used. But I do not believe there is actually a person out there who is just trans because it looks cool or because it sounds fun. And again, I say, and again, I will reiterate, you cannot in one breath say that everyone should be able to explore their gender and everyone should be able to test the waters of their gender and clothes have no gender. You can't say that and then turn around and say, oh, but I think you're just doing it for attention. I think you're just doing it because it's cool. You're chasing a trend. And I do know that there are queer people who say this. I know there are trans people who say this. And like, for me, I'm just kind of like, no, like, just stop. We cannot have it. Truly the example of trying to have your cake and eat it too. You know, you want to have this idea of everybody should be allowed to explore their gender, but then when people do, you accuse them of just following a trend because they're not doing it the way you think they should. Well, guess what? Gender it's not black and white. It's not yes or no. Some people, their gender is just all over the place and it's different and they have to explore. And yeah, maybe they, you know, transition and say, oh, I don't like this. So that's their business. Like, I truly think it breaks down to people need to mind their own fucking business. And among those people are J.K. Rowling and Elon Musk. Fuck the two of them with their bullshit nonsense. The shit that they've incited with everything with this fucking Olympic shit. Like, was J.K. Rowling really watching the fucking Olympics before that? It's not as if the UK did great at the Olympics. Like, come on. Since when do you give a shit about boxing? And Elon Musk, you shut the fuck up too. Jesus Christ, I'm tired of hearing about this. Like, just let the fucking boxer box. Jesus. Who fucking... And you know, here's the thing too, right? Here's the thing that gets me too. And people have said this, people have pointed this out. Besides the fact that this person is not actually trans, it does not matter. It doesn't fucking matter if they're trans. Do you honestly think, and now look, maybe I'm a special case, but let me tell you something. Do I look like the sort of person who has any kind of physical advantage when it comes to any sport ever? Like, people assumed when I was in high school that because I'm so, like, fat, that I would be good at, like, some kind of football shit. What they didn't know is that the whole time I was playing the fucking game, I was, like, trying to file my nails because I didn't fucking want to be there. I didn't, you know, PE was a nightmare, to say the least. So, like, I'm not that fucking girl, okay? I am not the sort of girl who has any kind of upper body strength. I can tell you probably almost every cis woman could knock me down in any kind of fight. And that's not because I'm playing dainty, it's just I don't fucking have strength like that. I think there's this idea that, oh, if you're trans, you just have some unfair advantage. And even trans people fall into this trap of like, we just have some unfair advantage. And it's like, no, bitch. Not all of us, number one. But number two, isn't the whole point of sports and the Olympics especially that you have like unfair advantages? I've never known sports to be fair. Like, isn't the whole point that you're like trying to build the best fucking team with the strongest abilities? Like, I don't get it. I mean, I do get it because it boils down to transphobia. It boils down to racism. Like, let's be honest. I don't know how to pronounce her name. Emaine, I believe, has never been trans, but even if she was, it would not matter. It's only going to matter to the people who are already decided that she's not woman enough. Her opponent decided she couldn't take it. And it's like, well, then why the fuck are you there? You know what I mean? This whole, oh, I was afraid for my life. Okay. Why the fuck are you boxing in the Olympics if you can't handle, like, if you can't handle your opponent, why are you at the fucking Olympics? And by the way, as people have pointed out, she, you know, Emaine has been beaten before by an opponent back when she fucking competed in Tokyo, which was the last Olympics. And this was not a big deal. So, like, they all agreed to be a part of this sport in the Olympics. You have to know that you are going to be competing against people who are fucking stronger than you. I'm so sick and tired of having to listen to people trip over themselves to be fucking stupid talking about trans issues. And you know what? I don't care if you're a fucking trans person. If you say something stupid, you're gonna get my ire too. I don't even care about sport. This is the thing that kind of pisses me off the most. You're making me give a shit about sports. Do you know how badly I don't give a fuck about sports? And you're making me care about sports. You're making me listen to shit about sports. Just because everyone wants to fucking talk about this and have their own stupid opinion that they don't know what the fuck they're talking about. It's like, Jesus Christ. I'd like to go back to not giving a shit about sports, please. Thank you. Ooh, high school sports. Trans girls are gonna play in high school sports and blah, blah. Oh, God. Nobody cares. Nobody cares. And if you do care that goddamn much about high school sports, baby, reconsider your fucking life. I am living. I just found this lipstick again for the first time in, like, ages. It's by Colored Rain. It's like this, I don't know what you'd call it. On me, it looks very, like, mauvey, nudie kind of color. I just like it. I love it, like, brown on me. I don't wear it enough. I'm, like, losing my voice now because of that tirade. Oh, gotta love it, huh? Gatekeeping and infighting among aspecs in how Alastor is portrayed in fanworks. I know multiple AroAce people who have gotten anon hate and threats over supposedly erasing Alastor's identity for Check's notes, putting him in queer platonic relationships that reflect their own experiences as AroAces. Everyone making fan works of Alastor with nuanced portrayals of AroAceness are also aphobes until proven otherwise, apparently. Sarcasm. So, look, I don't really have a horse in this race because I am not personally asexual. But I do have a lot of people that I know who are asexual, and I do know that a lot of the people who have commented on this topic in general are asexual because they are constantly made to feel like they have to specify that they're asexual whenever they give an opinion on this topic. I cannot tell you how many times I have seen people say, as an asexual person, I don't give a shit how you portray Alistair. I don't give a shit how you portray this cartoon character. And like, yes, we can have a discussion about how important visibility is. We can have a discussion about how important it is that these characters be visible and that we see who they are and what they're about and know these things. You have to listen to the people who are actually affected by this and how they feel about it, number one. But number two, being asexual is not as I understand it, it is not a, one size fits all. Yes, there are certain people who want nothing to do with anything sexual at all whatsoever. Then there are other people who, want it in certain circumstances, maybe with one specific person, maybe in one specific way. I think to a certain extent, and maybe I'm wrong for thinking this, but to a certain extent, I believe that like with butches and stone tops, that is sort of a form of asexuality in a way. It is part of I would imagine it's part of the spectrum. It's this idea of, I really only want this in this specific format. They are not interested in anything penetrative to them, but they still do want to pleasure their partner. And there are certainly people in the asexuality space who that applies to. So, and certainly when I'm writing Alistair, that's generally how I write him. So, again, it's hard because on the one hand, I am not an expert on this. I don't want to speak on this as if I'm an expert. I am only speaking on what I have heard from other asexuals, which is that most of them don't really care. There are many who do care, and there are many who they are like, I just don't want to see it. And that's valid and that's fair. But a lot of them don't give a shit. I think sometimes some of us have a tendency to overcorrect slightly. It's like we want to be inclusive, but to a point that I think you almost overcorrect and you make things worse. It's like, I want to include people. I want to not erase this person's identity, but you're overcorrecting to the point that you're ignoring actual people who are actually in the community who are like, I don't really give a shit. And I think it's also interesting of like, I have heard from people that there are those who will say, oh, you can't ship Alistair with anyone because he's asexual, which isn't quite how that works. But also, that same person turn around and ship the Alistair with a different person. They just didn't like who you specifically were shipping them with. So I do think to a point, it is something that there are things that are being used specifically to, I don't want to use the word gatekeep. I know they did, but I'm not going to use that term. I do think there are people who are definitely using it to their own advantage to be like, well, I don't like who you're shipping Alistair with, so I'm just going to say that it's aphobic for you to ship him with anyone, and then I'm going to do my own thing, but I'm correct because I just don't like your ship. Gatekeeping queer headcanons. This discourse honestly feels so pointless to me, but the rampant transphobia that comes up during it is worth discussing. People keep claiming that headcanoning gay characters and or characters in same-gender relationships as trans and non-binary is somehow erasing their canon queerness. Way to tell on themselves. How exactly would Angel Dust being a trans man make him any less of a gay man? Is it because you don't see trans men as men? That's what I thought. I'd seen it to a lesser extent with trans femme Charlie headcanons, but people seem to be most vitriolic about trans mask Angel Dust. Maybe it's the bigger sample size, though, because I come across more trans mask Angel Dust content. I mean, I think this one kind of speaks for itself. I'm not sure that I necessarily have anything more to add on this specific one. Interphobia/intersexism in fanworks. This is a general fandom problem, but I sure have seen a lot of it in the Hellaverse fanworks. It seems to be mostly caused by ignorance, not malice, but I think it makes it even more worthwhile to talk about. We have got to stop calling fantasy genitals / all non-cis normative genital configurations intersex. 90% of the time, the words fans are looking for is altersex, which is not a word I'd ever heard before, so thank you for introducing me to that, because that is really interesting, and I think that's really cool, and something that needs to be discussed. From Interact's Intersex Facts, intersex is an umbrella term for differences in sex traits and reproductive anatomy. Intersex people are born with differences or develop them in childhood. There are many possible differences in genitalia, hormones, internal anatomy, or chromosomes compared to the usual 2 ways that human bodies develop. Intersex is a word that refers to real and innate differences in sex traits / reproductive anatomy. A non-human character with animal or fantasy genitalia is not intersex. A character or person who transitioned to have traits that don't fall within the constructed sex binary has not become or transitioned to intersex. Again, the words fans are most likely looking for is altersex. From the LGBTQIA wiki page, altersex is a catch-all adjective to describe primary and secondary physical sex characteristics or a combination that do not align with typical arrangements. The term largely intended to describe fictional characters that have a mix of physical sex characteristics, but the usage is not exclusive. As I've said before, I do believe it's mainly caused by ignorance, but perisex fans and perisex people in general do have a tendency to react poorly when called out on their interphobia, lashing out and digging their heels in. Full disclosure, I am perisex, but I've seen intersex people complain about the tags being flooded with altersex content about people generally misrepresenting the meaning of the word intersex. So this comment, I think, is so especially important because I do feel to a certain extent that it is, again, the same issue with when I was talking about trying to overcorrect with the asexuality. I think to a certain extent, and I know that I have been guilty of this, it's the desire to maybe overcorrect and be like, okay, well, as I'm misunderstanding how this term is used, I have definitely used it in fan works when it probably was not the most appropriate, and I have since taken that down, and I will make sure that I am, do better in future, and that I don't, use a term that I don't actually know clearly. I don't want to do that. I am someone who, yes, I'm trans, but I'm technically perisex, so I certainly do not want to sit there and use a term that is not mine to use, and I don't really know enough, especially when I was not aware that altersex was a term that existed at all. It's interesting because Good Omens has this habit too, where because Crowley and Aziraphale are explained to not have sex characteristics unless they specifically want to, they have to make an effort. That's the whole big joke that's been since the show came about because it was from the book. So I notice it there too, where it's like people have to kind of decide what they want these characters to have, right? So there's always this thing where I feel like people feel the need to specify, like, this character has this character has this, in a way that I've never experienced it in any other fandom, which I kind of like that. I kind of think that's cool. And has been, and Hellaverse is definitely the same way in that I have noticed that people feel the need to specify, like, what genital configuration these characters have. I find that to be a very good thing and a very cool thing because it's kind of unquestioned. It's just something that we all kind of just decide with different characters. Some characters we lean more towards one thing or another. I think that's very exciting as a trans person personally. But at the same time, I want to make sure that we are using terms that are appropriate here. I don't want to use a term that is not correct in the way I talk about these characters and the way I describe them or the way I put a story in a certain tag, if that's not the case. Erasure of canon queer identities. This may sound out of pocket from the guy who was just complaining about false accusations of erasure regarding fanworks and headcanons, but give me a second to explain. I'm not talking about fanworks / headcanons. I'm talking about fans and antis, some of whom seem more invested in the franchise than actual fans, straight up claiming that confirmed canon labels don't count. This is mainly in regards to A-spec, M-spec characters in aphobia and biphobia present front and center. I've heard people claim that Alistair is an ace, no follow-up, just vibes, I guess. People claiming that Alistair is basically straight, which frankly to them is worse than the above. 3, that Cherry Bomb isn't bi because she's only been shown on the show in interest in men, and 4, that Charlie is a lesbian rather than bisexual because she's in a relationship with Vaggie. I've even seen one person claim that Viv herself isn't bi because, while she hasn't publicly shown interest in another woman, but real fans do seem conveniently to forget that Viv is sapphic, criticizing the portrayal of sapphic and M-spec characters in her shows. Now, I have a lot of thoughts about this, right? Because I think biphobia is something that we need to point out when it happens. I do think that we need to seriously have those discussions. I do think that people have this idea that, like, what's so funny is that to this end, someone commented something that kind of just proved the exact point that they were making. And it was, and I know they weren't trying to, but basically what they commented was like, oh, Charlie being in a lesbian relationship. And I'm like, well, no, she's still bi. Just because she's dating a woman does not make her less bi. And I think that is a topic that is something that needs to be talked about. You can't, unfortunately, I do feel like it's like, you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't, right? Because if you're a bisexual person who dates someone of the same gender, then you were queer the whole time in people's minds. But if you're someone who's bisexual who dates someone of the opposite gender, then you were always actually straight and you just wanted to be a part of the queer community. It's like trending, except for general queerness, not just being trans. I kind of feel as though the prevailing idea is like the only way to truly be bi is to date a man and a woman at the exact same time. I think that's how certain people view it. And it's like, that's not how that works. I think people need to really understand like the bicycle theory, learn about how, hey, people who are bi are not necessarily attracted to both genders equally. It's not like a 50-50 split. Maybe for some people it is, but for some people it could be 80-20, 60-40, 70-30. You know, it's not necessarily a 50-50 split. At the end of the day, a lot of this could be solved by minding your own business. Mind your own business. It doesn't affect you. How people dress doesn't affect you. People's sexuality doesn't affect you. None of it affects you. I actually have a friend who is by himself, who's by himself, and who has kind of pointed out that for him, this has been kind of one of the better fandoms that he's ever experienced. So I like to see that. I would like, ideally, for that to be the case. I mean, obviously, fandom shipping wars are always a thing and a nightmare and unavoidable. Well, no, not entirely unavoidable, but they happen. Whatever. And curate your own experience. Like, you cannot trust the algorithm to do it for you. Curate your own experience, mama. Thank you all so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed this video, like this video, comment down below, subscribe to this channel, of course. You can also join my Patreon, patreon.com/NarcissaDeville. Ding. It's my members only behind the scenes channel where I talk about, well, I'm going to be sharing a lot of like behind the scenes content for my book as soon as it's after the 20th. Until then, you can just pre-subscribe and tell me what you want me to talk about. I'd love to do like little videos that are specifically for Patreon. I think that'd be a lot of fun. Until next time, stay devilish and see you next Tuesday. Whoa.